So welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to the IBEC competition. We're really excited that you're here. What I would like to do is just some brief introductions so we all know who each other are on this call. And we'll start with the judges. And then we'll ask the students if you could just share with us your names. And it's really interesting for us to know where you are in your college career, what year you're in, and what you're studying. That's just interesting information. And once we do quick introductions, then I have a kind of introduction to our time together that I will read, and then we'll let you kick it off. Okay. And as I said earlier, don't stress about, the time. That's not a problem. We have quite a bit of time. So no worries there. Okay. So hi, everyone. My name is Maria Sonnen, and I'm the Uber judge for this session. It's not anything super special. It just means I get the extra job of reading all the instructions and all that fun stuff. But in my professional life, I am an internal ethics program manager. So I work inside of a company in an ethics function. And I work for a large defense company, US-based defense company called BAE Systems. And I am in lovely New Hampshire, which for the first time in a while, it's actually sunny and warm outside. So that's who I am. Elizabeth, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then Carl?
Sure, absolutely. My name's Elizabeth Weathers, and I'm an attorney in Dallas, Texas. I was in private practice for a while, and then I spent a number of years. I was the chief ethics officer for an international financial institution. And now I actually do ethics and privacy consulting. So I've kind of been the outside, the inside, and then another view of the outside.
Well, I'm Carl Oliver, and I'm in California. I'm retired from the corporate ethics office at Northrop Grumman Corporation.
All right, would you like us to introduce ourselves now? All right, my name is Samantha. I'm a sophomore at U of I. I'm studying finance. I'm hoping to graduate in December, so it's very exciting.
Hi, I'm Arushi Raizada. I'm also a sophomore. I'm studying accountancy and information systems, and I hope to graduate in 2025, I think in the spring.
Hello, my name is Leighton DA. I'm a sophomore studying operations management. I'm also hoping to graduate spring of 2025.
Hi, my name is Emma, and I'm also a sophomore studying accounting and information systems, and I'm graduating December 2024.
Okay, Tanner, go ahead.
I'm Tanner Warnick. I graduated a long time ago, but I'm here as an advisor for these students. And just so you know, I'm not a lurker. I'm here for a reason.
No, fabulous. Glad to have you, Tanner. Okay, all right. So I'll go ahead and get started with the introduction to the structure here and what we're going to be doing over the next hour or so. And then you guys can prepare yourselves. You can take a few minutes and share if you have a presentation, which I assume you do, you can share it then, and we'll go on mute and let you guys do your thing. So in this part of the competition, you will be taking on, the students will be taking on a fictional business identity and assigning us, the judges, a fictional business identity. Please be sure that everyone knows who you are and also who the judges are before you begin or as part of your presentation. You'll have 25 minutes for your presentation. We'll give you a 5-minute cushion to describe the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem and to recommend a solution that addresses all 3 counts. During this 25 to 30 minutes, we will not interrupt you. When you're finished, we, the judges, will ask you questions for about 20 minutes. And during this Q&A, we are going to stay in whatever character you have given to us. And we'd ask that you stay in your characters as well. When we wrap up the Q&A, and I'll just let everybody know we're kind of transitioning on to the next part, we'll give you feedback as judges outside of our kind of role playing. And some of the feedback that we give you is also going to be not just on how you did today, but also some feedback that might help you tomorrow as you go through your 10-minute and 90-second parts of the competition. So important thing to keep in mind, the ethical aspects of your analysis is the most important part. However, we would like this described in a very simple, practical, common sense way, not using technical terminology or basing your argument on religious or theological grounds. And during this presentation, this 25-minute full presentation, each of you should have a speaking role. So does anyone have any questions? Okay, all right, fabulous. So I'm going to go on mute and we'll give you a minute to get your presentation started, and you can go ahead.
Right. Leighton, I believe you're sharing, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, are we all ready to start? Okay. Hello, I welcome you guys as the board of Cloud Dev, a software company, and we are here to present to you our presentation. Smile, you're on camera. This is a guide to ethical employee monitoring software. So we are Sale Consulting. My name is Samantha.
I'm Arushi.
I'm Leighton.
And I'm Emma. Did you know that 80% of companies globally utilize some sort of employee monitoring software to track employees? And as a result, 59% of the employees within one company experience more stress and anxiety. So Cloud Dev is a tech software development company responsible for developing software for small and large businesses. And Cloud Dev values honesty, trust, and respect, privacy, and transparency among all shareholders and stakeholders, both internally and externally. So Cloud Dev has sought the consulting services of Sale Consulting to address one problem. Cloud Dev has been utilizing employee software, surveillance software ever since the pandemic, and seeks advice to utilize functions within the software to ethically monitor the employees as they transition to hybrid work. And to solve this problem, we as Sale Consulting presented a 3-part solution framework to help Cloud Dev monitor employees ethically, thus aligning its values of privacy, trust, and respect both internally and externally. As mentioned earlier, our solution could be broken down into 3 parts, consisting of which we could explain more in details later of ethical surveillance methods, transparency initiative, and employee survey. And our agenda is that first, we're going to talk about the background, second, the legal context, third, the financial implications, fourth, the ethical standpoint, and finally, our solution. And first, we're going to talk about the background. As to why surveillance, the pandemic drastically changed workplace dynamics as people moved from in-person work to fully remote and then to hybrid work. After the pandemic, over 59% of employees prefer remote work over in-person as they prefer the flexibility. And hybrid work is essentially a compromise between employees and employer, as employees prefer remote work and employers prefer the employees to come back in office. And many companies like Cloud Dev installed their employee surveillance software in hopes of managing the employers effectively, even when they are not in person, as there are concerns for employee productivity. And Cloud Dev argues that Surveillance monitoring software can help manage employees by making sure that these employees are on track and complying to company procedures while being able to protect the company data accessed by these employees in their own homes. In addition, the software reduces administrative works as the data analytics functions in these software can generate performance reports more efficiently than in-person evaluations. And Cloud Dev currently uses Terramine, which is one of the best employee surveillance software in the industry. And Cloud Dev utilizes these functions such as email communication, idle time, keystroke tracking, mouse click tracking, application usage tracking, screen monitoring, camera recording, and malicious activity blocking. So email communication is essentially just monitoring the files that the employees sent out through their emails. And idle time is to make sure that the employees are consistently working in their laptops. And keystroke and mouse click tracking are just like how their activity within their laptop. And essentially, some employees believe that these functions raise a concern of privacy and trust. And second, I'll turn to Sam for the legal context.
All right, so getting into some of the legal context surrounding the situation for Cloud Dev. So the first question that we have to consider is this legal? And the answer is yes. So there are laws in place that establish the fact that employers are allowed to use employee monitoring software. One such law is the Electronic Communications Privacy Act. This was passed in 1985, and this basically set the framework for privacy laws surrounding electronic communications, when previously this was not something that was thought about because of the leaps and bounds that have been made in terms of technology. So this law establishes that the legality of employee monitoring software. Additionally, there are other state laws that would have to be considered from a state-to-state basis based on where a company is located. So states could impose more harsh laws than the federal level. There also are some limitations to keep in mind. One such limitation is HIPAA. When employers decide to collect sensitive health information, which may or may not be something that an employer decides to collect, they have a heightened responsibility to ensure the safety of that data. There's also the idea of unreasonable invasion. So this typically has to do with the idea of putting a camera in a bathroom. So there's a very high bar to meet. So in terms of what Cloud Dev is doing currently, the answer is yes, it is very legal. There is a clear framework that shows that it is legal. But that is not to say that there are not any potential liabilities. So one such liability is data leaks. Whenever you're collecting data from employees, and this could be in many different forms. So if Cloud Dev is tracking application usage, or they're tracking files on their employers' computers, then if there was to be a data leak and sensitive info from employees was leaked out into the public and was used with malicious intent and caused harm to an employee, they could be held legally liable for the harm caused by those data leaks. So there is a responsibility to keep the data secure. Additionally, there's a consideration of labor laws. So there are many labor laws in place that try to prevent employers from abusing their employees and protecting union activity. So one consideration that Cloud Dev needs to keep in mind is that if they use location tracking in order to inhibit union activity, as such examples of this is Google got in trouble with the NLRB over their use of employee monitoring software, which would alert them to groups of 100 or more employees gathering. And they would use this information to try and stifle union activity. So Google is an example of somebody who's gotten in trouble for this. And another example is Whole Foods. Whole Foods came under fire because of their use of heat maps that would essentially show how employees were grouping outside of work in order to try and stifle union activity before it is able to take off. And the NLRB has noticed this activity, and they released a memo in 2022 that basically specified that they are looking to strictly enforce all laws regarding labor, and especially in application to employee monitoring software. And they have sought a partnership with many other organizations such as the FTC or the Department of Justice and the Department of Labor. Additionally, there are many financial implications that need to be considered. So one of the big reasons why Cloud Dev decided to use employee monitoring software to begin with is that many employers feel that they're not very confident that their employees are going to be productive. And they feel that productivity is a really strong financial concern. You pay your employees a lot of money and you want to make sure that they're being productive when they're at work. So we know that 12% of leaders across industries have low confidence that their workers are actually being productive when they're at work. Only 12% are actually confident that their employees are being productive. This contrasts with an employee self-report, which shows that 87% feel that they are being productive at work. So there's this discrepancy between the employer's perceived productivity of their workers and the employees' productivity themselves. And this creates something called productivity theater. This is the idea that employees feel pressure to look busy, even if they don't actually have anything to do, when they feel that their bosses are going to be watching them. So this can create counterproductive behavior, just trying to appear busy and outsmart the system. And 54% of employees did report that when they're monitored, they feel a pressure to look busy, even if they don't have anything to do. There's also the question of, does employee tracking software actually increase productivity? Because we know that this is a major concern. And while the evidence opinions are mixed, there is some evidence to suggest that it might be helpful. There is some evidence to show that incentive-based performance can be improved when you use employee monitoring. But this was a study that was done on tipped workers at Olive Garden. So this is a bit different from the space that Cloud Dev is in. Cloud Dev is a software company, and their workers are working from home, and they might not have those same incentives. And this was tracking counterproductive behaviors such as stealing. So they found that stealing was reduced when people were being watched, which is logical to think. But there's also a lot of evidence to show that productivity is really not increased when you use employee tracking software. There was a 2021 study done on agency, and it found that when employees feel a lack of agency in their work, they tend to respond to that with counterproductive behavior. And this could include anything from trying to outsmart software, stealing, just breaking rules. They try to seek that form of agency in other ways by breaking rules and counterproductive behavior. And this is also further supported by a 2022 meta-analysis. And this looked at a bunch of different studies that have been done regarding the subject. And it also found that there wasn't any proven connection between the use of employee monitoring software and an increase in productivity. So we know that as a whole, the evidence and opinions are very mixed and kind of leaning towards suggesting that it's not really effective. Furthermore, we know that one big financial cost to any company is employee turnover. We also can say that low employee satisfaction can lead to employee turnover. We already know that 66% of employees feel negatively impacted when they're being monitored. We also know that 54% of employees feel lower job satisfaction due to employee surveillance software. And lastly, we know that 37% feel that it's a violation of their privacy. So this is not something that is well received by employees, and this is something that Cloud Dev needs to consider, that their employees are probably not very happy with being monitored. To continue with how this kind of relates into employee turnover, additionally, 54% of people said that they would be likely to quit. They'd be likely to consider quitting if their employer just said that they were going to start using employee monitoring software. We also know that 1 in 4 would even be willing to take a pay cut to avoid this. So this is something that is really not well liked by employees. And lastly, coming into this employee turnover, it's extremely costly. So based on an average salary of $54,000 a year and estimated turnover costs of 33% of annual salary, we can estimate that it's going to cost about $17,820 per employee that Cloud Dev has quit due to this use of employee monitoring software. And this could be much higher if Cloud Dev is having very highly skilled software engineers who are getting paid upwards of $100,000 a year and have a very specified skill set. And this could cause turnover costs to be even higher than $30,000 per employee.
Moving on to the yeah, thank you, Sam. Moving on to the ethical standpoint for employee monitoring. We first want to take a look at the 4 values that Cloud Dev espouses to follow: honesty, trust and respect, privacy, and transparency. Cloud Dev wishes to maintain honest communication between itself and its employers, and making sure that they create that culture of honesty and to avoid as much dishonesty as possible. And this leads on to that value of trust and respect. Cloud Dev wishes to treat its employees with dignity and with respect, and to treat them as people instead of as tools to be used and sharpened and discarded. And having that sense of honesty and respect from its employers, employees can then have and create mutual trust between itself and its employer, Cloud Dev, that they will do the right thing. And this leads on to the idea of privacy. Cloud Dev is committed to protecting the privacy of its employees, but besides just preventing data leaks, it also means that Cloud Dev should be avoiding overstepping their boundaries and avoiding possible invasions of privacy when they can. Fourth, transparency. This talks about how Cloud Dev wishes to maintain transparent, tell their employees what is going on, especially if they are collecting data, and to allow themselves to be held accountable by their employees when any issues arise. When talking about how employees feel about being monitored, a survey conducted by DTech Systems asked 3 questions of all employees and monitored the responses. The first question was whether or not employees believe that employers monitoring them was acceptable. And of that sample size, 45%, less than half of the employees believe that employee monitoring was an acceptable option. And it really speaks to how much employees value their privacy. Furthermore, though, 70% said that they would strongly consider changing their jobs if their employer had been monitoring them without consent. And this speaks even more strongly to how much more important transparency is to employees, and not just their own privacy, but being in the know and not being fooled or having a dishonest employer. And indeed, that idea of being honest and being transparent with employees is reflected in this statistic. 77% of employees agreed that they would be fine with tracking so long as their employers told them beforehand about what they're being collected on and how they're using that data, and allowed the employees to consent to that data collection. Furthermore, employees don't also have feelings, also feel a certain type of way towards excessive surveillance that provides them with immense pressure, whether this be through screen recordings or through camera monitoring software, where the company can look through the video camera of a computer to look at the employee to see whether they are at their desk or not. And we found that this type of excessive surveillance has a myriad of negative effects, including decreasing job satisfaction by 10% and increasing the stress levels of employees by 11%. Furthermore, as Sam mentioned earlier, this leads to productivity theater, in which a lot of employees are pressured to work more hours, 1 hour more, 2 hour more overtime, and do almost no work or do ineffectual work, and only serving to waste their own time and their employer's time while creating more stress for themselves. And lastly, there is a feeling of trust and agency. When there's distrust between the employer and the employee, employees generally tend to have agency towards their own actions. When they feel that their employer is monitoring them all the time and they end up making mistakes, they feel responsibility to make up and to own up for those mistakes, and they end up relying on employers to catch those mistakes and to end up punishing them instead of taking initiative for themselves. Now, in order to follow by those 4 values that Cloud Dev aspires to, SAIL Consulting has also identified 5 principles of data ethics as outlined by Harvard Business Review to use as frameworks for deciding what methods of data collection are best to use and which ones are not. To start off with, consent. Does the user consent to data collection? This ties to the value of privacy for Cloud Dev and whether or not the employees consent to allow their private information be in the hands of their employer. Transparency, this principle aligns with the value of the same name, and just how will data be collected, stored, and used, and letting the employees in on what Cloud Dev is planning on doing with that data. Third, security. This is also a legal liability in that by collecting more data needs to be put on servers, needs to be secured and encrypted. And this should incentivize Cloud Dev to collect less data and to collect only data that is most relevant, instead of doing everything and then sifting through the data once everything has been collected. Moving on to intention. these last two, intention and outcome, are the more important principles for this framework. Intention should mean, what is the point of collecting this data? Is the point of collecting this data to see how secure is the software? Is the intention to check compliance for employees, or is the intent to catch out employees who are performing below standards and to punish them? And that leads to outcomes. Is the expected outcome of these methods of data collection to punish employees, or is it meant to act as a method of feedback to improve their software, to figure out methods of improving employee productivity, or possibly as another method of assessing the workflow and the abilities of employees to provide them with another platform for promotion or pay raise. And moving on to solution, I'll hand off to Arushi.
Thank you, Leighton. So now we're going to get to the actual solution part. You guys have obviously called us here for a reason, and that is to help you guys. Currently, I know Emma touched on this briefly at the beginning, but it's been a while, so I'll touch on it again. We've been brought here to assess 3 different surveillance methods that you guys are thinking of implementing, and we've been brought here to help find a solution for how to improve employee efficiency and improve that connection between Cloud Dev as your company and your employees. So our solution has 3 main factors that build up the overall solution. First is the ethical surveillance methods that will be used by you guys on your employees. The second factor is the transparency initiative that we've come up with to help Cloud Dev as a company be more transparent with its employees about tracking methods. And finally, the third factor is employee survey. At the core of the solution is the employees and that trust and agency relationship that they're building with your company. And so in doing that, our employee surveys are our way of finding out little differences in the solution and how we can make that solution better. Before we get into all of that, though, we'll start off with the ethical surveillance methods. And something that we looked at when analyzing the 3 surveillance methods that you guys have brought to us was whether or not it was bringing us useful or frivolous data. Useful data is exactly what it sounds like. It helps with security, compliance, administrative work. It gives you useful information. Frivolous data, on the other hand, is data that is really unreliable and doesn't actually prove security, compliance, or administrative work. Essentially, it's unnecessary and can serve to make employees feel like they're being unnecessarily tracked. To get into this table, I know it looks like a lot, but we currently looked at what Cloud Dev is tracking and what you guys are thinking of applying to track your employees. Currently, you're tracking email communication, work versus idle time, and application usage. And in our ethical analysis, we found that those satisfy not only Cloud Dev's values, but those ethical principles of data collection. However, the last 3, screen monitoring, keystroke input, and camera monitoring, are 3 surveillance methods that you guys are looking at to potentially implement. And unfortunately, we found ethical concerns with all 3. Screen monitoring and camera monitoring, we found that they violate the value of privacy for one of Cloud Dev's 4 primary values, and therefore we felt that they would not be ethical to implement. Keystroke input, we found violates one of the key values of data collection that Leighton just covered, intention. Keystroke input and camera monitoring both do not have the intention of collecting useful data. Instead, it's more frivolous data that won't actually provide you guys with any concrete evidence. So for those 3 reasons, we felt that these 3 methods would not be ethical to implement on your employees. This brings us to the second factor of our solution, which is how we can build on that trusting relationship between the employees and your company, Cloud Dev. And we felt the way to do this would be through a transparency initiative. Transparency is the first step towards building trust and eventually that relationship between an employer and its employees. And so we felt that the best way to do this would be to implement a transparency pop-up. I mentioned earlier on the last slide that you guys are currently tracking 3 different aspects of employees' working time. So the way that we felt it would be best to build on this transparency aspect would be to have a pop-up that would pop up whenever an employee is being tracked. This would give them an accept or decline option and would allow the employee to be aware of when they're being tracked. And if you remember all the way back to when earlier in our presentation, 77% of employees have shown to be okay with being tracked as long as they're aware of when it's happening. So through the implementation of this transparency pop-up initiative, we felt that disclosing when employees are being tracked would help build that efficiency and trust relationship. This would also focus on the third aspect of our solution, which is employee surveys. And this is basically to test the employee well-being when it comes to these tracking initiatives. We feel that Cloud Dev has the ability to gain feedback really from your employees and test out their reactions and their responses to when they're being surveilled. In this sense, we felt that it would be useful to implement employee surveys to get some of that feedback right away. To put together a little bit of an implementation timeline for you guys, just to give you a good example of how long it'll be going, we felt that it would have, we would start off with the first phase, which would be to analyze potential surveillance methods. And good news, we're doing that right now. So that would really only last about an extra week. Then we would talk about implementing transparency disclosures, and this can take anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks, maybe even 3. Then we would go into employee surveying and readjusting any more that would have to be added to the disclosure. And finally, we would wrap up the project. All in all, this should only take a couple of weeks, about a month maybe. So we anticipate that this won't take too much time to implement. Finally, looking at just a legal analysis of why our solution fits into these 3 buckets, monitoring software is legal. Cloud Dev, you guys are able to monitor your employees. What we're focused on is how we can mitigate some of the potential liabilities and ethical principles that might be violated by these principles or by these surveillance methods. And we felt the best way to do that would be through that transparency initiative. We feel that this will help mitigate employee turnover if employees feel like they are aware of when they're being tracked, and might help reduce employee turnover costs. And this would also abide by those principles of data ethics and Cloud Dev's values themselves. All in all, our solution has 3 factors: ethical surveillance methods, transparency initiative with that pop-up, and finally, employee surveys for feedback. And that is our solution. Yeah, that's about it for us. Thank you guys so much. If you have any questions, we'd love to answer them and help you understand our solution more.
Excellent. So if you'd like, you can go ahead and stop the screen sharing. Perfect. So Elizabeth and Carl, what are your thoughts, questions?
Thank you all for the presentation. I do have a few different questions for you, and I'm sure Carl does as well. Some of these are more just practical questions to make sure I understand your solution. On the pop-up, what happens if the employee declines?
So that would be something that I think Cloud Dev would be able to decide. For us, there are 2 options that we see. One, if the employee declines to be surveilled while that's going on, then that would definitely be something that could either they wouldn't be able to access whatever that software was or whatever that email was, or they would not be tracked. And that kind of goes hand in hand with what Cloud Dev's employees feel. If Cloud Dev's employees align with the 77% of employees that we found through our research are okay with being tracked, as long as they're aware of when they're being tracked, then that would simply be that they wouldn't be part of that tracking procedure. However, if they do decline and they're unable to access that software, that would be something that we would look into further, definitely after revealing feedback from the employees.
Yeah, and you know, it just strikes me that if the employee is not allowed access to do their work unless they agree. Have they really agreed? Is it really, a voluntary agreement? I know, like, for example, under GDPR, if we were to do this outside the US, there is no agreement or consent in that kind of relationship because it's not really truly voluntary. And if you're going to let people not be tracked and continue to work, then what's the benefit to the company of just tracking a few people? We're still paying the money to implement this, and we may or may not get a benefit. So that's on my, on the pop-up, that was just my first thought of how would that really work?
Absolutely. And that's a very, very valid point. We can definitely do more research into that and let you know if it does turn out that maybe offering an accept or decline option isn't something that employees are reacting well to. There is always the option of taking that kind of option off and making it more so of a transparency pop-up that just
like
says,
an acknowledgement.
Yes, an acknowledgement. There's always that option as well to make it more of an acknowledgement that I acknowledge the fact that I am being tracked and I am aware of that. So there's always that option as well. I think that would be something that would come in during the implementation or employee survey phase, where we would kind of take some of that feedback that I think we're getting even right now and implement that into our future solution.
Okay, this is Carl. Overall, I'm really impressed by the presentation you've put together for us. I see I'm a member of the board of directors. I'm kind of new at this board of directors stuff, so I really appreciate what you've done, and you've called it guidelines, but you've really tried to outline some standards for good surveillance that that we can work to. And you've identified it in terms of our values, which is really a positive thing. I am concerned about the dissatisfier statistics because the psychology research talks about satisfiers and dissatisfiers. And you want your employees to be feeling satisfied, but when more than half, up to 2/3 roughly, are dissatisfied when surveillance is used, that's a real problem for me. And it tells me something we ought to shy away from. And I don't know if you have more to say about that. Is there any magic lamp that we can rub to convert this to something that employees are really happy about? They say, oh, the company's really got my back. They're watching all the time and they're coming in and helping me when I have trouble. Anything like that you can speak to?
Well, I think one thing that we need to consider is that a lot of these statistics are about how employees as a whole across many different industries feel about employee monitoring software. And this includes a lot of different types of uses. So this is including maybe people who the only way that employee monitoring software is being used for them is to tell them when they're not meeting quotas or they're not being logged in enough. And so it's constantly only being used in a negative way towards them. And one thing that I think we presented in the presentation is that a lot of those types of uses are not really useful. Things relating to individual employee productivity, we've shown that there's not any reliable evidence to suggest that that is actually going to lead to greater productivity. So one thing that I think was not emphasized as much was that a lot of the aspects of how we outlined which types of employee monitoring software uses were okay. One thing that we were considering with that is that we're not going to be using, we don't want Cloud Dev to be using types of features that are only focused on employee productivity, because we've already established that there's no real reason to think that that's actually helpful. And this kind of ties back to the whole useful frivolous data thing. But tying back to your question, I think that the way that this employee monitoring software is being used across the industries as a whole, it's being used in ways that are very punitive towards employees rather than being used in more holistic ways to do and for useful reasons like timesheet tracking and security reasons and administrative reasons that create less work for people. So I think as a whole, the way that a cloud dev can mitigate this idea of the negative employee satisfaction that we found as how most employees end up feeling is that they can be using this in a different way than most employers are using it currently.
So can I follow up on that? Who would have access to the monitoring results, to the data? Once, let's say we monitor and we collect all of this data about what our employees have done. What do we do with it once we have it? Who's allowed to look at it? How long do we keep it? What is a positive use of it? And how do we assure our employees that the information will not be misused? Because as Carl pointed out, I don't want to do anything that is going to make employees leave us. We want our good employees to stay. We want to develop them. So if there's a positive use to this, like what is the use we're looking for, and who's allowed to use it, and what are they allowed to do with it? And I mean, how long are we going to keep it, and all those types of things. Anytime I think about adding data, it makes me wonder, so why? What do we do with it? How do we use it?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think one of the things that we were aware of is that Cloud Dev is already implemented the three softwares that we mentioned earlier. And we're not completely sure of how you guys are using that, some of the internal processes. However, there is some positive aspects of using that data, being able to track employees' working time, being able to look at, ensure that employee work is up to standard, whether or not the company image is being presented in a proper way. There are always positive uses to tracking software, and we're aware that Cloud Dev, you guys have actually asked us to look into those extra three. And while those extra three might have some positive impact, I think overall we conducted an ethical analysis of those extra three surveillance methods that you guys haven't implemented yet. And those were what we found, that the negative aspects of that surveillance outweighed the positive aspects of those benefits. So we don't recommend those three surveillance methods to be used. However, the three surveillance methods that are already currently in use, those are what we believe that implementing a transparency initiative will help make the employees feel more at ease about what is being shared from their data and where that's being held. And that's also something that you guys will be able to decide as well, that we can always implement what is being disclosed exactly about transparency. Currently, we have a very basic formula that's just letting the employees know that they are being tracked. But if that's something that you would like to do to give your employees extra security in their being surveilled, that's definitely something we can add as well.
If I could just add something else to that as well. So there's lots of different ways that data might be used and could be useful to employers, especially for Cloud Dev. So if Cloud Dev is using idle time tracking and things such as that, application use tracking, these are things that could be used by an HR department for payroll. And this is reducing administrative tasks, and this ultimately saving the company money in that sense. So this is things that might be accessed by HR professionals, and also would be accessed maybe by data analysts within the company to look at holistically how their data is being collected. And also maybe security analysts have a role in the use of this data by analyzing what files are being accessed by employees. This is a way to mitigate data leaks. So there are many different ways that this data could be used in different departments within Cloud Dev if you're not doing so already.
Interesting, thanks.
If we, I don't know if we can go back to a slide that you showed earlier, which was the values plus principles slide. But it bothered me a little bit because I understood the values. I recognized the values that you were talking about. But the principles supporting those values were worded as questions instead of as statements. I was expecting statements. So I'm a little unclear as to what principles you really were talking about.
Is it this slide?
No, it's not that slide. The title of it was Values plus Principles.
Was it potentially the data principles slide? I think that's the one that has the questions under the 5.
That's
Does the user consent to data collection?
5 principles. No. Yes, that's it. That's it.
Okay.
That's probably it. Yeah.
So
There's questions. Yeah.
yeah, so the questions were just there as sort of questions for when analyzing the different methods of data collection, like shown in this table below.
Okay.
Just questions to ask about.
I see what my mistake was. I thought it was linked to the values. Yeah.
Okay.
I see what you've done now. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate your clarification on that.
Mm-hmm. No worries.
So as a board member, when it was first decided by management to bring in this employee tracking data, I really wasn't a big supporter of it in the beginning for many of the reasons that you all have brought forward to us. And my question at that time, and I think my question to you as well, is, you know, if we're worried about productivity or assessing employees' performance, that's the job of managers, right? To set clear expectations and to manage their employees and their work product and output. And I guess my question to you all is, you know, do we need to be doing any type of surveillance of our employees at all?
So I don't know if you guys mind if I take this question. So I think that when it comes to whether we should be using employment software at all, I think it is definitely, it seems concerning when you see that this is not really any shown benefit to productivity and that it could potentially have a negative impact on employee turnover. These are both important financial metrics. But I think as a whole, we have to keep in mind the fact that this is not the only purpose for employee surveillance software, because there's also many ways that it could mitigate liabilities and save Cloud Dev money in the long run, which is in your interest. That there's a strong security interest to use employee monitoring software to make sure that you don't have things like documents being leaked out or important internal company information. In addition to that, this is also something that can save a lot of money in terms of HR professionals. If you can have fewer HR professionals that are focused on larger issues, rather than maybe doing a lot of time consuming work regarding payroll and things like that of that nature, or so there's multiple uses for this type of data, the outside of the ones that are generally the ones that are causing the most harm and causing the most financial negative impacts. So if you're using employee monitoring software in a way that is not focused on employee productivity and doesn't feel punitive to them, then that's a way that you can mitigate that risk of employee turnover. And so you're able to kind of reap the benefits of using employee monitoring software for its uses in security and administrative work, while also getting away from all of those negative impacts that have to do with trying to track productivity when you know that it's not really effective.
Okay, still not sold.
I wonder how easy it is for employees in this monitoring environment to game the system. So it makes it they make it look like they're really busy when they're really not. Can they fool the software?
Emma, would you like to take this question?
Did you would you repeat that question again?
How easy is it for the employees to fool the software? They figure out what is being monitored, and then they can game the software, game what they're doing, so it looks like they're really busy when they're really not.
Yeah, like there are like many employee surveillance software that monitors like idle time and like laptop screen activity. So basically, I feel like it's kind of easy for these employees to trick the software by just like opening up their laptops and just leaving it on when they're doing something else. I think it's fairly easy.
Maybe another thing to note with that is also kind of ties back into things like the type of screen monitoring that are meant only to track productivity. That might not be as useful because it can also be gamed very easily. So there's an issue of timesheet tracking and monitoring, just monitoring working hours. So that's an issue of like time theft, but it's not as severe as employees feeling like they're being watched, and so they have to create fake activity within the computer to avoid punitive measures against them. Especially if Cloud Dev has a lot of software engineers who are probably salaried rather than working hourly wages. They might not have, as long as they're getting their work done, they might not have so much incentive to fake their work hours if they're not being punitively attacked based on those work hours. So that's one other thing to think about.
I was gonna bring that up because I'm trying to understand the value of tracking when it comes to time. And I really don't see how we would save money, for example, on HR and payroll, because as you mentioned, our exempt employees get paid regardless of the number of hours they work. And our non-exempt employees have to be paid for every hour they worked, even if they're not logged into a particular system. What if they're replying to emails on their phone because their system's down? What if they're, in a meeting and so they're not doing keystroke? There's a lot of work that is required by law to be paid that is not going to be captured in this system. So while it might be some proof of somebody's turning in crazy hours and we can look to see if they were working, it can't substitute for a proper timekeeping system. So I don't really see how we would save any money on that. It could be a backup reference, but I don't see how it would substitute for, proper timesheet tracking.
So would this be for the 3 surveillance methods that Cloud Dev is already implemented?
Well, for any of them, because I think one of the benefits you told us was that we could potentially save money using what you've proposed because we wouldn't need as many HR professionals. This could help with timekeeping. And I really don't understand how being able to track just what someone's done, say on their laptop, substitutes for the legal requirement of paying somebody for all work done, because every one of our employees could potentially do work that's not tied to their laptop, unless we're potentially going to monitor their cell phones or other behavior within their home when they work from home, which I really hope nobody suggested that.
Of course. I think that is, again, that is a very valid concern. To be honest, when we were brought on for the project, we weren't really given a lot of information on the types of monitoring that Cloud Dev is already implemented. I think that was implemented well before we were brought on as a consulting organization. However, if that is something that you guys feel is important and you would like to look into the validity of those previous 3 softwares that the company has already had in place, that is definitely something that our consulting organization can do. We can definitely look into those 3 and see whether or not they're actually saving you money or not. I think what Sam had initially talked about with saving money, and I think what you're asking, that had definitely been part of our analysis for the extra 3 methods that were being asked about. Those 3 were ones that we were under the impression we were analyzing. So we wanted to conduct a thorough analysis. So we looked at the benefits and then weighed them against those drawbacks. And we did actually find for those 3 that the drawbacks did outweigh the benefits. So if you guys would like us to look into those previous 3 that Cloud Dev has already implemented, that's definitely something that we can do as our next steps.
Carl, did you have any other questions as a board member? No? Okay. All right, great. So now we're gonna drop our roles and we're going to give you all feedback. And feel free while we're giving you feedback, if you have questions on it, to interrupt us and ask. And you know, this can be a 2-way communication or a 8-way communication, however many people we have on this call. But Elizabeth, did you want to go ahead and go first?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I want to tell you guys, you did a great job. It's a timely topic. It's an interesting topic. You did a really good job presenting. You talked about what's going on. I think a couple of times there was a bit of a tendency to read the slide to us, which, I mean, we can all read, but you did a really good job of talking through your slides rather than just putting text on a slide and reading to us, which made it a very engaging topic to talk about. I will tell you guys, I mentioned I was chief ethics officer at this financial institution. It was a hybrid role. I was actually chief privacy, ethics, and human resources officer through the pandemic, work from home, hybrid, all of that. I have just been through this in real life at a real life company. So I could like talk forever about the topic. I'm not really sure I agree with all of your legal conclusions you put in there, but again, because it's just so nuanced. And so when you're doing this in future in real life, I would just say, always remember everything is nuanced and it depends on how you use it. And I mean, I love your response. I think it was Arushi a couple of times when you said, we did not look at that, but we could, because it's really good to own what you've done, what you haven't done, and where you're going. So just from presentation, I think you did a great job. I would have enjoyed a little more focus on some of the ethical pieces of what might happen, you know, when you accidentally learn things about, because one of the big risks is when you accidentally learn information about your employee that you weren't supposed to know and what you do with it, which is why I asked, like, who has access to the monitoring? But no, I really enjoyed this. Great job, guys.
I have scored 3 U of I Champaign-Urbana teams. Every one of them has been outstanding. You have delivered an outstanding presentation, really in keeping with what your school's reputation is. One of the ways I identify it as outstanding is you provide something that is extra that other teams don't think of. And in this particular case, what you did do was you identified the 4 values. Ethics is based on values and principles that implement those values. And hardly any team that I score thinks to talk about the values that are at the heart of the matter. But you did that outstandingly, and I really appreciate that. I will comment that one of your last slides, I think in the summary, talking about values and principles and data ethics, I think was the title of it. The word principles is misspelled. They're two words, principals and principals, and principals got tucked in there. But that's kind of a minor thing most of the time, although somebody in the audience is going to notice that and be distracted by it. So you try to avoid that. The other distractor, people are doing very well about not saying you know, but in general, we're hearing the phrase "you guys" pop into presentations recently, and that has proven to be a distractor also. You can take the word "guys" out and just say "you," and it comes across much more professionally. Overall, I thought it was excellent, and the statistics you had on the dissatisfiers was very useful. The fact that you phrased it as a guideline, as a standard for surveillance to meet was excellent. Terrific job. Thank you.
So I think that you did an excellent job. I really loved how you clearly communicated who you were, what your purpose was. You clearly told us who we were. You stayed in those characters throughout the entire presentation and even through the Q&A, often referring to the company's name, for example, and you know, the responsibility of cloud dev. So you reinforced that throughout the presentation, and that was fabulous. I agree with Carl on the, you guys, it does get a little, it's not so much a distraction. It's more, you're coming in a very professional type of situation, talking to a board of directors, and it's a little too informal. I wish English was a broader language and we had a plural for you, such as French does, but we don't, sadly. And so I know the temptation to say you guys. I say that too in my day-to-day life, but it is something to ensure that when you do go out into a business world that you're checking yourself on that. In terms of for tomorrow, right, for your 10 minutes, the concept of tomorrow is that you've been brought back by the board of directors to discuss to really hone in on the ethical ramifications of the issue and the solution. It will probably most likely be a different judge or different set of judges. So be sure you reintroduce yourselves again as the consultancy company and that you are addressing the board, and reintroduce who Cloud Dev is. Make sure that you note that because you're not going to have any slides, right? So you're going to have to make sure that you note that what you've been asked to do as consultants is to look at additional surveillance beyond the current surveillance that the company has, and what are some of the ethical issues around this additional surveillance. One thing I didn't really, you could have maybe focused on a little bit more in this presentation is the difference between those two things, right? I know you had the list, like you're doing email monitoring, you're doing keystroke, but here are the other ones that have been presented, that management has presented or whatnot, and they say that the additional benefits are going to be 1, 2, 3, but here are the additional ethical issues because of ABC. I think that's kind of how you have to present it so that it's very, very clear what you're doing. But overall, I thought it was great. I agree with Carl. Really great job in tying it into the values of the company. So important. And also, you know, bringing in the bigger picture kind of principles of data collection. It is a really good topic. It's a tough topic. I think a lot of companies are experimenting with it now. I personally, not only as a fake board member, but of Cloud Dev, but personally, I actually feel that it really is kind of an invasion. And the biggest thing that it does is it lowers trust. Because if I don't believe that my company trusts me to work and to accurately report my time and to create work product and earn my salary, then I'm not really sure, you know, why I should. If my company doesn't trust me, why should I trust my company? And you know, that trust part is, I think, one of the biggest issues in this whole thing. But anyway, I'll stop. I think you guys see, I just did it. I think you all did such an outstanding job, and I'm very, very impressed with your composure and professionalism.
Absolutely.
For just, no, I don't mean just in a negative way, but for being so early in your college careers and in your careers in general, adult lives, so composed and dynamic, all of you. And it's just excellent job. Excellent. Do you have any questions for us? Anything that we can help you with for tomorrow, or what if you plan on doing this again next year?
Well, I guess so. For our presentation tomorrow, the 10-minute presentation, you said this is without slides. So then I'm trying to think about how conversationally, like keeping it so that the judges understand everything that's going on, like throughout it, when there's no visual aid to like can make that connection with it for that entire time, so that, you know, we can, like, just because it's easier to keep that like logical flow and understanding with the slides as an aid, but maybe through conversation, I just want to make sure that our points are not getting lost.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Samantha. And one of the reasons that we have the 10-minute and the 90-second without the use of slides and a very shortened time frame is because there are going to be times in likely in your careers when you're going to have to do that, right? You're going to have to persuade somebody without a visual aid or in a short period of time. My suggestions to you are to be very judicious with what you concentrate on, right? Concentrate on the most important parts of the solution and the most important parts of the ethical issues, right? Definitely tying it to the company's values. I think that one way of that people can do this successfully without PowerPoints is to use when you're speaking, let somebody know what it is they're going to be hearing. So, for example, I'm going to share with you our solution. Our solution is blank. I'm going to share with you the 5 ethical values. They are this. I'm going to share with you the 3 ethical issues. They are this, right? So then people, then it's almost like you're creating a PowerPoint in their mind, right? And so, and they can like lay it out in their mind, and then you just elaborate based on what you've just said. Does that make sense? Does that help?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, exactly what Maria was saying. Like, oh, I'm sorry.
No, please.
I was just like, you know how you gave us 3 proposals? So if you say, we have 3 proposals for you. Our first proposal is this. Our second proposal, this, third, this. These are the 3 proposals. Make very clear when you're talking, when you've switched from 1 to 2 to 3, rather than just talking through them. Because we don't have anything to see. So you have to tell us. So it might feel a little elementary, but it's really not, because if you don't say, I'm now switching from proposal 1 to 2, and you just talk about all 3 of them in a row, and we don't hear that you've moved from 1, 2, and 3, it gets muddled. So, you know, it's really good. You give that verbal outline since we don't have a written one.
And for the 10-minute, sorry, Carl, just one quick thought. For the 10 minutes, you don't have to share all the information that you had in the 30. It's not just 30 minutes put into 10 minutes. So if you just want to concentrate on one of the things that this gets a little muddied with this is that the company already is doing tracking, right? And so they're asking you about this additional tracking, right? But if you want to simply focus the 10 minutes on your company is doing employee tracking, we have some solutions to increase transparency so that you're in line with your values. The solutions are the consent and the survey and getting the employee feedback and buy-in, right? So you don't have to do the whole thing over again, but in 10 minutes, you can concentrate on a piece of it, of your solution, if you want. It's up to you, totally up to you. Carl, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, no problem. From a presentation standpoint, I'm reminded that your hands are part of a presentation. And if you watch the judges, they've been using the hands quite a bit. Mine are below the picture, and yours typically are below the picture too. But I have the sense that maybe you haven't been using your hands. But when you've got 3 points and you hold up 3 fingers and you count down them, people are going to track that. That's kind of a visual aid that you have built into you. So don't hesitate to go ahead and use your hands in your presentation.
Yeah.
That's a
And
great
one last
point.
thing I'll say, piggybacking off what Carl said, really, we use our bodies for body language in the presentation. And I know it's so different. You're on camera, you're on a Zoom, we only see your head. But if you're not, I would very much recommend you practice standing up to do this, because standing makes you automatically more engaged than just sitting and talking. If you've only ever sat and talked and you don't want to make the change before tomorrow, I would understand that. But when you stand up, you're already more engaged and more interesting, and you put your body more into it, and it comes across as more confident. So I would very much encourage you, if you guys, see there, now we're all doing, I'm in Texas, I say y'all.
We're all doing it.
Where did y'all come from? No, but if you're thinking about how you actually present, when you stand, you're more engaged, because you did a wonderful presentation, a great case study. I want you to do well tomorrow. So please take all of this as just our thoughts on how you continue to improve.
When
And you don't have
stand-
to, go ahead, Carl.
When you stand, we teach you to put your hands in the zone. The zone is between waist and shoulder. If your hands are in that zone, they will automatically do things that you want them to do.
And just to add on to what both of them are saying, you don't have to have your Zoom, because there'll only be one of you, correct, doing the 10 minutes. Who's doing the 10 minutes? Or is more than one of you doing the 10 minutes?
I think we were under the impression that all 4 of us do the 10 minutes and one person does the 90-second.
Oh, you could be right. I always forget that.
But we might be wrong.
No, not all 4 of you. It's two or 3. It's actually better, I think, to keep it to 2 or 3. So you should choose 2 or 3 of you to do that. And then the 90 seconds is just one person. But you don't have to have your image, just your head, right? You could zoom out and stand up or show your waist and above, and then you could incorporate some of the body language and tips that Carl's shared with you around the counting and stuff like that. I think that would be really, you're perfectly able to do that. That's not a problem. You don't have to be a certain size. Any other questions for us? So I'm gonna I'll just read you the instructions for the 10 minutes because I have them in front of me. You have been called back by the company you gave your full presentation to for a second visit. They have asked you to speak only about the ethical aspects of the problem and to explain why your solution handles any ethical issues. You will have 10 minutes, no Q&A. You may not use slides or a video. And you probably don't want to have more than 2 or 3 members of your team to do this. So those are the instructions. Okay. Any other questions for us? We're happy to help.
I guess in the event that we are coming back, I think under the situation that you said, we are looking at how our solution focuses on any ethical issues. Would you guys suggest then cutting it to like the values and the principles, and then like whether or not, like cutting the solution to just whether or not those three line up with the values and principles? Or would you suggest, and that be our solution? Or because our solution is a bit of a two-part, where the first part of our solution is, should you implement these three? And then we say no. And then how can we make the first three that you're already implementing better, which is through transparency. So would you suggest maybe focusing on one aspect of the solution for the 10-minute, or, okay.
I personally
one?
say yes, just because it gets a little bit. Yeah, I would suggest yes. And which one? I mean, I guess at the end of the day, that's up to you. Your solution is the part of your solution that I think is really important from an ethical standpoint, because it ties back to your values, is how can you increase employee transparency and trust? So however you feel, and if you want to use it more as a negative, like you want to do these increase in surveillance, and that is going to decrease. So our suggestion is not to do it, versus you've already done it. So here are ways that you can, right? I think the thing is that it feels to me like choosing one or the other would be better. I don't know, Carl and Elizabeth, what are your thoughts?
I like the idea of picking something that you're focused on for the 10 minutes rather than trying to give a very super high level of everything, because you like hearing that it's nuanced, that it's thought out, that you have more to offer than just throwing out ideas. And you really can't get into nuance of 4 things in 10 minutes. So, for me, I mean, obviously it's your presentation, and I wouldn't ask you to go retool your plans, in one day. But if you have the opportunity to really focus on, you can say, we looked at 3 and here's the one we really want to propose to you as important, the survey, because you value transparency, and and then you work through it that way.
You're setting up standards. Here are the standards that we're talking about, our guidelines to you. Here's the values, here's the principles, and here's how they apply to your situation. Very simple.
All right, yeah.
Does that help?
Yes, it
Okay.
does, definitely. Thank you so much.
All right, fabulous. Any other thoughts, questions? Nope. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all so much. Really appreciate it. Great job, and good luck tomorrow. And thank you, Les, for all your help, and to our judges.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank